Adam and Chad, you were the cinematographer and production designer of the film Loving, respectively. So tell us a little bit about recreating the period of 1958 to about 1967. Let me start with you, Chad, because your work really did require a lot of research.
Right. Yeah, from the beginning, we were, able to check out the documentary that Nancy Bursky had made for HBO. And, she also had extra footage and photography that just sort of laid out a blueprint of what their life was like and, what it looked like when they were living around Virginia. And so that, it was invaluable information to us, to have all of that research right in front of us. And Gray Villette's photography, that was, a big help in just capturing stills of their life that we could sort of, gather information from on the look of how their life was. And they were extremely simple people, and we wanted to keep it that way and make their backgrounds and environments simple and let the focus be about them.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, I mean, there is on the one hand recreating a period, but there's also creating an environment that looks like these two people actually lived in.
Right.
And you also have to chart the progression of about a decade
right
in their lives.
right
So what was the challenge there?
I mean, it was just sort of, seasonal wise, it was, pretty interesting to keep up with, for sure. Just lots of organization and planning on when we were going to schedule and shoot these season changes and growth and sort of, I mean, the progression during that sort of period, doesn't change too much as as a whole in the South. It pretty much just stays the same. From these houses that were probably that they lived in were probably built in the 30s and 40s. When they lived in them through the 50s and 60s, it was just sort of this 40 or 50-year gap of time that was all very meshed and similar together.
Hmm. So Adam, as the cinematographer, what was your, shall we say, visual approach stylistically to this material?
Jeff and I had kind of gone over it in the beginning and trying to figure out if there were any, I guess, baseboards or springboards to kind of work off of for palette and kind of something to lock onto as a film. In the beginning, to be honest, we really didn't find anything from that time period from the South or encapsulating that time period that was a Southern film. So we kind of, as Chad alluded to, kind of gravitated towards some of the archival footage, some of Gray Villette's work, and then just all of us are Southern, and we kind of have some background there of looks like and how it should be, that's kind of how we kind of did it. We also went back to mud and looked at that and what made that work for us in terms of lensing and camera movement. The one thing it's kind of tangential. When we did Midnight Special, we shot that in the South. Very, very much a different movie from Mud and Loving. It was an interesting thing because we basically wanted to do Loving the exact opposite of what we did on Midnight Special in terms of shooting in golden hour, which we did none on Midnight Special because it was basically all at night. Shooting in a beautiful part of the year, the late summer, early fall, which we just shot in the winter on Midnight Special. And we had a very hard schedule on Midnight Special. So we took all that and we're just and that really kind of steered us towards shooting a beautiful time of year, shooting golden hour, shooting exteriors, and that script lent itself to that. And so we kind of used our mistakes and what we learned, good things from the past, and kind of put them all together, and kind of that's how Loving was kind of birthed in the look of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a feeling of classicism to the visuals of it, but there's also a sense of timelessness and immediacy, I think, as well, and a subtlety too. You know, it's not
Yeah.
like
I think yeah, I think like we were talking with Chad, and then the production design was spot on, but very simple, but very detail oriented. If that makes any sense, if you really root down and look at it, um, and yeah, there's definitely a timelessness there, and that's what's come up in many interviews that we've had, and with Jeff too. How spot on things seem. They don't seem forced, and that's a big compliment to our whole film crew, not just to us, but doing a film that doesn't seem forced. It's simple, and as Chad was talking about a few minutes ago, really puts the acting in the foreground, while all the other stuff that we do with camera movement and all that, and production designs in the background, and just letting people really get into the heads and what was going on with the Lovings.
Well, I mean, this is a way it is with, working with Jeff overall in general. Like he's, we all trust each other, and he knows that, I don't like to force anything to be on the screen. And working with Adam, he's not a DP that like always has to see something in the frame. If it's not supposed to be there, then like we don't force something to be there. So, it's great to work with those two over and over, because they get what real life is. We don't try to make something it's not.
Try to keep it simple. That's our keep it simple, stupid. I mean, it sounds crazy, but we try not to draw attention too much to camera movement. We don't want to pull the audience out of it. Maybe someday we'll have some camera that flies around and does crazy stuff, but right now we don't. The same with like production design. It's all we want to put the viewer in a realistic environment and have actors too in a realistic environment. Locations that the Lovings actually inhabited, and then Chad going in and doing a spot on job with like a living room or even a couch or a kitchen, so when they're in there acting, like they're in their element. They have like a good, which is I always call it like a good feng shui on set, and it brings me into it. Like I don't want to go somewhere that's like, well, this is kind of might work, but maybe not, like, because that just oozes out of me and to everybody else on set, and it's like, oh, we're kind of making this is kind of makeup. But if we go to somewhere that's like spot on and meticulously art directed, or a beautiful field at golden hour, we're like, okay, this works great, and the actors and and everybody in the crew just kind of feel it, and I think it definitely shows up on the screen in the final.
And I mean, even if the the camera doesn't see 360 of a whole completed set, it's it's just good for the actors and the crew to get in the headspace of being able to be like in a fully functional place. That's what I like, giving Jeff on these sets, is the ability to have the actors let them go anywhere they want instead of being restricted to like a certain corner of the room. And I think it comes out and helps everybody overall.
It's kind of weird. I mean, that's a good point. I never really thought. I mean, I thought of that, but like we're the actors. There's a camera. It's always nice to see somewhat. You can't do it all the time, but a somewhat finished set on the other side. Even though you have a camera in between you and that fourth wall,
right?
Like there's always a good feeling, and I think that's another thing that helps, that our actors have actually commented on in the past.
Right.
That they can kind of just look around, or they can go in another room, even though we're not shooting in there, and go hang out, and it's not like a dilapidated, place, or it's like, or whatever. But we have fun doing what we do, for sure.
I think that also what this film does extraordinarily well is that even though it's set 50, 60 years in the past, it feels very immediate and of today.
Right.
I mean, obviously, we're still dealing with a lot of the same things that Richard and Mildred were dealing with. And I think that, I guess, as this was being made, the Marriage Equality Act was being passed for LGBT people. So can you talk a little bit about that, about creating a feeling of immediacy for the film?
think the immediacy is spawned from I mean, keeping it a very simple camera movement, always being in on Richard and Mildred, Joel and Ruth, and it's like as we keep saying, it's just a simple love story, and we just focused on them, and Chad's alluded to that as well. Like, didn't have any crazy art direction or production design in the background. The camera wasn't crazy.
Right.
We just focused on the two of them, and in the end, I guess it's just a love story that that's been going on for eons, and it's kind of a good counterpoint to what's going on with all the divisiveness now. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, whatever nationality or religion, like, you can definitely come to see the movie and take something away from it. It definitely brings people together instead of, it's not a courtroom melodrama or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the timelessness. It's just, a simple story about love.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah, for sure.
One more thing I wanted to ask was that I know that you guys shot on location for a lot of this, including at like the actual courthouse and some of the actual locations. So what did that lend to the film?
I mean, it was great. I mean, one of our first scouts, when we were being shown around the area for the first time, sort of the lay of the land and where everything took place, I had no idea we were going to ride up and pull up in front of that at the real courthouse they were tried in.
Yeah, he's talking about the Caroline County Courthouse.
Right.
Yeah, it was, it's just kind of exciting, mind-blowing. I mean, the same tables and chairs that were in there when they were tried were sitting there when we shot it. It was incredible. And just like right on the same property grounds was the exterior jail that they were tried in. They were put in. But yeah, I mean, it was exciting. I mean, like riding around to their houses that they used to live in. I mean, most of the locations were just like minutes from where they grew up and lived their whole life. So I think it just really tied in the whole like feeling of the film is just to be in that area.
Yeah, and I think I know that Ruth has commented before to us, and then in some other interviews, of just riding around and seeing the houses that Chad was talking about that they grew up in the area really helped her kind of maybe, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but like hone her direction. It really, even with Joel, like Joel went out and worked with some masons for like a month or so, which Richard was in the movie. I think it was a good place for them to, as actors, to kind of root down and really find the story between the two and what was going on, which Jeff afforded to them. And then when we're shooting, like, we try to kind of afford the same thing to them, putting them in realistic environments and being true to their story.
And it was like the real loving couple was basically, and it's super, crazy when I would go to, always check on sets and start prepping things that I would, constantly be passing the graveyard that they're buried in. So it was like, just pretty trippy to keep riding by them as I'm going to work, making a movie about them. I think it was, that doesn't happen a lot.
Right. Well, it certainly helps lend it that sense of authenticity, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Chad, Adam, thank you both so much. Congratulations
on
the movie.
Yeah.
Thank
Have
you,
a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.